A house has two front doors, 10 feet apart, both on the same porch, both under the same roof. If you walk through the left door, you enter a bedroom with a fireplace and a rope bed. If you walk through the right door, you enter a kitchen with a fireplace and a cast-iron Dutch oven. Between the two doors, framed by the porch, is a gap, not a hallway, an open passage. Roof above, wooden floor below, open air on both sides. Because in Texas, in 1856, the coolest room in the whole house was the one without any walls. This is a dog trot. 2 rooms, 2 pens they were called, separated by an open breezeway, all under a single roof. Chimneys at each gable end, a full-width porch across the front, and in the middle, an open passage that the wind ran straight through from May to October. Between the 1830s and the 1890s, tens of thousands of these houses were built across Texas, from the piney woods of the east to the limestone hills of the center, along cotton bottoms in the Brazos Valley, on yeoman farms in Fannin County, on German settlers' land in Mason County, on plantations in Rusk and Cherokee County, on freedmen's small farms after the Civil War. The dog trot did not begin in Texas. It came with the settlers. It walked in from Tennessee, from Alabama, from Mississippi and the Carolinas, in the wagons of Anglo-American farmers moving into Mexican Texas in the 1820s and 1830s. And once it arrived, it kept going west, further than the same house had gone anywhere else in the South. The reason it worked in Texas is one story. The reason it stopped somewhere between Austin and San Antonio and never crossed into West Texas is a different story. And the story of who built these houses and whose land they stood on is a third one. All 3 stories happen inside that 10-foot gap between the 2 doors. And by the end of this video, you will understand why the dog trot is still, 170 years later, one of the most recognizable and one of the most misremembered houses in Texas. In 1821, Stephen F. Austin brings the first 300 Anglo-American families across the Sabine River into Mexican Texas. They come from Tennessee, from Alabama, from Mississippi, from Kentucky, and the Carolinas. Most of them are small farmers looking for cheap land. Some are cotton planters looking for room to grow their operations. Some are freedmen and freedwomen. Many more are the people the planters enslave and bring with them against their will. They arrive with wagons, with plows, with rifles, with cookpots, and they arrive with a house. The house is not a plan on a piece of paper. It is a memory in the hands of the men who built houses at home. 2 log rooms, pens they call them, joined under a single roof, with an open passage between them. Chimneys at each gable end, a front porch, a steep pitched roof, clapboards held down by weight poles, no nails needed. The dog trot was already old by 1821. It had emerged in the Appalachian backcountry in the late 1700s and spread through the deep South cotton frontier by the 1820s. Its logic was simple. If you were building a 1-room log cabin and needed more space, you had 2 options. You could extend the roof and add a 2nd room right next to the first. That was the saddlebag house, with a chimney shared in the middle. Or you could leave a gap between the 2 rooms and cover it with the same roof. That was the dog trot. The dog trot's genius was the gap. In an Alabama summer, or an East Texas summer, or a Louisiana summer, a chinked log wall traps heat all day and releases it into the room at night. But a covered open passage catches the wind. Air moves through it. The wind draws heat out of both rooms through their inside doors. The breezeway becomes the coolest place on the property between noon and sundown. The dog trot was, in other words, the Frontier South's version of air conditioning. We are going to walk through one of these houses in a moment. We are going to stand in the breezeway. We are going to feel the summer wind move through it. But before we do, I want to name where the story goes complicated, because the dog trot's genius as a climate machine is also the story of whose land it stood on, whose labor built it, and who was allowed to own one and who was not. In 1856, near a stream that runs into the Pedernales River in the Texas Hill Country west of Austin, a man named Sam Ely Johnson builds the west half of a dog trot cabin. Sam Johnson is 36 years old. He is a rancher and a Confederate cavalryman in a war he has not yet fought. He has come to the Hill Country from Alabama by way of Georgia. His wife Eliza is 21. They have a small child, they have a piece of land, and they have the memory of the house they grew up in. The house they build is a single pen at first, one room of hand-hewn cedar logs, notched at the corners in the style Sam Johnson learned as a boy, a stick-and-clay chimney at one gable end, a clapboard roof, a dirt floor at first, then split-log planks. 12 years later, in 1868, Sam Johnson adds a second pen on the other side of an open breezeway. The house is now a dog trot. 2 rooms of cedar logs, roughly 14 feet wide by 16 feet deep each. A breezeway between them, about 12 feet across, open on both sides and roofed above. Chimneys at each gable end. A full-width front porch. The Johnsons will live in this house for the next 30 years. Sam Ely Jr., Sam and Eliza's son, will grow up in it, and his son, Lyndon Baines Johnson, will visit it as a boy. Today that house is preserved by the National Park Service on the LBJ Ranch west of Stonewall, Texas. You can walk through it, you can stand in the breezeway, you can hold your hand against the cedar logs and feel that they are still cool at 3 o'clock on an August afternoon. Sam Johnson's dog trot is not a mansion. It is not even, by the standards of the American house, particularly large. Both rooms together, plus the breezeway, are about the size of a modern one-bedroom apartment. What Sam Johnson had in 1868 was a house of a very specific size. Exactly the size his family needed, exactly the size he could build with the timber on his land, exactly the size his wife could keep, and exactly the size the hill country summer could cool for free. The dog trot was engineered from the outside in. It was engineered by climate, by material, by labor, and by the geography of the settler frontier. And nowhere in America did those 4 forces line up more precisely than they did in Texas between the 1830s and the 1890s. Now hold Sam Johnson's dog trot in your mind, and let me tell you the geography of the form. The Texas dog trot is an East Texas and Central Texas house. It concentrates most heavily in the piney woods of the East. Nacogdoches, Rusk, Cherokee, Sabine, Angelina, Trinity, Polk, Jasper, Newton counties. It runs west across the Blackland Prairie, Washington, Fayette, Grimes, Brazos, Fannin, Grayson counties. It reaches into the hill country, Mason, Blanco, Kendall, Bandera, Gillespie counties, where German settlers built it out of cedar and live oak. It does not go further west than that. Draw a line, in your head, from Fort Worth south through Waco, Austin, and San Antonio. That line is the 98th meridian. West of that line, the climate changes, the land dries, the tree cover thins out. The timber that made the dog trot possible in the piney woods is not available on the Panhandle Plains or in the Trans-Pecos Desert. So, west of that line, Texas settlers built differently. They built sod houses on the Great Plains, half dugouts on the Panhandle, adobe on the Rio Grande, limestone rubble in the western hill country, Fachwerk, half timber and stone infill, in Fredericksburg and New Braunfels. The dog trot never crossed into West Texas because the trees to build it did not grow west of the 98th. But east of that line, and especially south of the Red River, the dog trot dominates. The reasons are 4. First, timber. East Texas is the western edge of the Great Southern Pine Forest. Bald cypress lines the bayous, pine, oak, cedar, and hickory grow on every ridge. A settler could stand on his land in 1840 and count more free construction material than he could use in a lifetime. Second, climate. East Texas summers are Louisiana summers with a little more wind, humidity in the 90s, temperatures in the 90s, nights that don't drop below 80. The breezeway was not a luxury. It was survival. Third, distance from mills. In 1840, the nearest sawmill in Nacogdoches County was in Nacogdoches itself. The nearest brick kiln might be 40 miles away. Milled lumber, glass windows, and brick chimneys were possible in Texas, but they were expensive, and they required roads, and roads did not yet exist in most of the state. A log dog trot could be built with nothing but an axe, a saw, a chisel, and the labor of a family and their neighbors. Milled materials could be added later as roads came in. Fourth, and this is the part the frontier picture book version of Texas leaves out, the land was cheap. Not because it was empty, because it had been made empty. Between 1821 and 1859, the Republic of Mexico, then the Republic of Texas, then the state of Texas, granted, sold, and seized land at prices that no one who had lived on it before had ever imagined. Indigenous nations, Caddo, Karankawa, Wichita, Tonkawa, Comanche, Lipan, Apache, were pushed off, killed, or removed. Mexican Tejano families were dispossessed of grants that had been theirs for 100 years. And onto that emptied land, the Anglo settlers brought their houses. Every Texas dog trot that stands today stands on land that was taken. That fact does not disappear because the house is beautiful. It is part of what the house is. Now walk up the porch steps of a dog trot. Any dog trot. Sam Johnson's or Hedwig's Hill in Mason County, or a Nacogdoches farmstead photographed by Russell Lee in October of 1939. You are back at the two doors, 10 feet apart, on the same porch. The porch runs the full width, 20, 30, 40 feet, and it is a room in its own right. Chairs on it, a dog on it, a washtub at one end. In the evenings, the family will sit on the porch and greet neighbors and watch the road. Step into the breezeway between the two doors. It is 10 to 15 feet wide. On either side, a door leads into a pen. Above, a roof. Below, split log or plank flooring. The breezeway is open on both ends, front and back, so that when the wind blows from the south, as it does most summer afternoons in East Texas and the hill country, the wind runs straight through. Push open the door of the left-hand pen. You are in the sleeping room. In this family, the parents share a rope bed against one wall. The children, 3 of them, one at a time until the loft is finished, share a smaller bed against another. A trunk holds the family's clothes. A washstand holds a pitcher and a basin. The fireplace at the gable end warms the room in winter. The window, if there is a window, faces the breezeway rather than the outside. The breezeway wall of the pen is the door. The outside walls are logs. Cross back through the breezeway. Push open the door of the right-hand pen. You are in the cooking room. The fireplace at this end is larger. Iron hooks hang from it for kettles. A cast iron Dutch oven sits on the hearth. A rough plank table stands in the middle of the room. Shelves along one wall hold plates, cups, a bag of coffee, a tin of lard. This is the room where the mother of the household spends her day. She cooks here in the mornings. She washes clothes in a tub outside the back door. She hangs meat in the smokehouse 10 yards from the house. She hangs washing on a line strung between 2 live oaks. Go back to the breezeway. This is where the family lives in summer. The father repairs harness here after supper. The mother sits and sews here in the afternoon. The children play here in July when it is too hot inside the pens. On Sundays, the neighbors sit in the breezeway with the family and everyone drinks coffee out of tin cups. The dog trot is not a house with a hallway. The dog trot is 2 small houses that share an outdoor room. The outdoor room is the coolest place on the farm. The outdoor room is also the family's parlor, workshop, and dining space between May and October, which is more than half the year in Texas. This is what the dog trot was doing that no other frontier house could do. It was giving a family that had almost nothing, a piece of land, an axe, a wife and children, and the labor of their own hands, a house that was cool in summer, that could be built for almost no cash, and that could be finished as the family got richer. And it was giving them, in the breezeway, a room that no wealthy family in the north had thought to build. Now, walk out the back of the breezeway. Turn left, walk 50 yards to a cluster of small cabins near the edge of the cotton field. These are the other houses on the property. In Rusk County, in 1855, on a cotton plantation like Monte Verde, there are 8 of them. In Grimes County, on a mid-sized farm in 1860, there might be 2 or 3. In East Texas cotton country in 1855, more than 180,000 people are enslaved. About 30% of the population of settled Texas is black and enslaved. Some of them live in single-pen cabins built out of the same logs as the dog trot, but half the size and without the breezeway. Some of them live in double-pen cabins, 2 rooms side by side, no gap between them, 1 chimney shared. A few of them live in dog trots of their own, especially on the larger plantations that housed extended enslaved families. The people who lived in those cabins built them. They built the main house too, in most cases. In the WPA slave narratives collected in Texas in 1936 and 1937, ex-slaves describe the labor. Andy Anderson, born enslaved in Washington County, remembers his master's plantation quarters as log cabins with dirt floors and sticks and clay chimneys. Aunt Susan Merritt, interviewed near Rusk in 1936, describes the master's dog trot and the quarters cabins behind it in a single breath. The same materials, the same axes, the same hands. The dog trot is a small house. The plantation dog trot was small too. In Texas, the largest planters did not build the columned mansions of Mississippi. They built dog trots, larger dog trots, and eventually frame farmhouses with dog trot floor plans. Wealth in Texas was measured in acres and in enslaved people, not in mansions. This is the piece of the dog trot story that gets left out of the frontier heritage version. The romantic picture of the dog trot is the yeoman farmer's picture, a white settler and his family on their own land, building their own house with their own hands. And that picture is real. The yeoman farmer with a small log dog trot in Fannin County in 1855 is a real Texas story. But that picture is not the only Texas story. The plantation dog trot exists. The enslaved cabins behind it exist. The land the whole property sat on was land that had been indigenous land or Mexican Tejano land and had been taken through war, treaty, or displacement decades earlier. The Texas dog trot is not one thing. It is at least 3 things, all built with the same axes, all standing on the same taken land. A yeoman farmer's house, a planter's main house, a quarters cabin. Sometimes on the same property 50 yards apart, framed by the same trees. I am telling you all of this now, in the middle of the video, because the dog trot cannot be honestly explained without it. And because the story of what happened next, the transition from log to frame, from small farms to cotton bottoms to freedmen's parcels to lost dog trots, is the story of those 3 houses and what happened to the families in each of them over the 60 years after Sam Johnson built his first pen. After the Civil War, 3 things happened to the dog trot at once. The first is materials. By 1870, sawmills and brick kilns are opening across East Texas. Railroads reach Nacogdoches in the 1880s. Milled lumber is now cheap. New dog trots, and there are still new ones being built through the 1890s, are built in frame instead of log. Windows become common. Chimneys go from stick and clay to brick. Roofs go from clapboards held by weight poles to store-bought shingles and then to metal. The second is who is building them. Freedmen and freedwomen, people who were enslaved in 1864 and who received emancipation in June of 1865 in Galveston on the day now called Juneteenth, begin buying and building small farms of their own in the decades after the war. Land is expensive. Credit is nearly impossible. Discrimination is legal. But some freed families acquire small parcels, 40 acres or 80 acres, in the East Texas piney woods and the Blackland Prairie. And on those parcels, they build dog trots. The dog trot in this period becomes, for a generation, a Black-owned farmhouse in a Black-owned rural community. Places like Freedmanstown in Houston or the rural Black communities of Rusk and Panola counties contain some of the last-built Texas dog trots. Houses raised in the 1880s and 1890s by families whose parents or grandparents had built the same house as enslaved labor for someone else's family a generation earlier. The third is that the dog trot begins to disappear. By 1900, the form is old-fashioned. Formal houses, 2 stories, 1 room deep, no breezeway, replace it. Bungalows arrive in Texas cities. The Houston Heights fill up with them in the 1900s and 1910s. Chicago's Bungalow Belt, 1,700 miles north, is building the same kind of 1.5-story brick house at the exact same time. The dog trot does not compete. Its floors are dirt or planks. Its walls are logs or thin frame. Its winters are cold. Its breezeway in a rainstorm is a wet passage between 2 isolated rooms. As electric fans arrive, as screened porches arrive, as gas heat arrives, as automobiles arrive and let families live further from a river or a spring, the passive cooling breezeway becomes a design that solves a problem that has other solutions now. The dog trots that are still standing in 1920 are old houses lived in by old families. Many of them are enclosed. The breezeway is boarded up. Sometimes it becomes a kitchen or a bathroom or a small extra bedroom for a grandchild. Sometimes the pens are joined and the whole house is re-sided in the newer clapboard style, and from the outside you cannot tell it was ever a dog trot at all. Then, in October of 1939, a photographer named Russell Lee, working for the Farm Security Administration of the United States government, drives into East Texas with a speed graphic camera. Over the next 3 weeks, he photographs dozens of them. Dog trots in San Augustine, in Nacogdoches, in Marshall. Dog trots enclosed. Dog trots not enclosed. Dog trots with families still on the porches. Dog trots empty and falling down. His photographs are the reason we can see these houses today. He photographed them a few years before most of them were pulled down. Today, the dog trot in Texas is scattered. It is not a landscape anymore. A yeoman farmer's dog trot in Fannin County. Most of them are gone, fallen in, or torn down for a wider frame farmhouse in the 1920s, or lost when the family moved to Dallas in the 1950s. The Hedwig's Hill dog trot from Mason County, a German settler house from the 1850s, was moved in 1981 to the National Ranching Heritage Center in Lubbock, where it stands today, restored alongside a saddlebag house and a half dugout and a chuck wagon. You can walk through it. You can stand in the breezeway. Sam Johnson's dog trot, the west wing built in 1856, the east wing added in 1868, stands where it was built, on the ranch that his grandson bought back into the family in 1951 and eventually turned into the Lyndon B. Johnson National Historical Park. Rangers walk visitors through it. School groups sit in the breezeway. In the summer, you can feel that the breezeway is still the coolest room on the property. The Stern Hoya House in Nacogdoches, one of the oldest continuously occupied Anglo residences in Texas, stands as a museum. Adolphus Stern bought the land in 1826. His house is not itself a dog trot, but the property once included dog trot outbuildings. A few dozen intact historic dog trots survive in East Texas, in the hill country, in the Blackland Prairie. Many are on private ranches, unmarked, undocumented, held together by the family that inherited them. Some are being restored, some are being enclosed, some, in the last 5 years, have been replicated in high-end dog trot-inspired custom homes selling for $300,000 and up in the same hill country towns where Sam Johnson built his West Wing for almost no cash in 1856. The house is being remembered. It is also being forgotten. Both things are happening at once. A visitor at the National Ranching Heritage Center in Lubbock stands in the Hedwigs Hill breezeway on a July afternoon in 2025 and feels the wind move through and does not know that the wall of the pen behind her was cut with a broadex by a man whose great-grandmother was indigenous, or Mexican, or enslaved, or all three. The breezeway does not tell her that. The house does not speak, but the house is here and the story is here, and both are hers to carry if she wants to. The question this video began with was, why the Deep South version of the dog trot kept going west? Why this particular house, out of all the vernacular houses of the American frontier, walked across the Sabine River and settled into Texas the way it did? The answer, at the end, is not one thing. It is four. It went west because of climate. Texas summers were the summers the dog trot was designed for. The wind, the humidity, the heat, the length of the season. From Nacogdoches to Blanco County, the dog trot was the right house for the weather. It went west because of timber. East Texas was the last great southern pine forest of the American frontier. From the Sabine River to the Balcones Escarpment, a settler could build a dog trot with nothing but the timber growing on his land. It went west because of cash. The dog trot required almost none. A settler with an axe and a saw and a family and a neighbor could raise one in a season. Milled lumber, brick chimneys, and glass windows could be added later as the family got richer, as roads came in, as the sawmill in Nacogdoches sent lumber down the river. And it went west because the land was made available through treaties, wars, land grants, displacement, and violence to Anglo-American settlers between 1821 and 1859 on a scale and at a speed that no other frontier in the American 19th century matched. The dog trot walked into Texas at the same speed that the land was being cleared for it. What the dog trot built, a covered breezeway, 2 small rooms, a porch, and a summer that a family could survive, was real. What the dog trot required, timber, labor, a family's own hands, and a piece of land, was also real. But the piece of land is where the story turns from ingenuity into inheritance. Every dog trot in Texas is a house of both. It is a house that a family built. It is also a house that was built on ground that was taken. Drive east from Austin, cross the Colorado River. Keep going. The hill country falls behind you. The Blackland Prairie rolls out in front of you. Somewhere around Brenham or a little east of it, the land changes again. The pines start to come in. And you are entering East Texas. Watch the farmsteads out the passenger window. You will not see a dog trot on every mile of road you would have in 1875. You would not in 2026. But you will see them if you know what you are looking at. A frame farmhouse with a suspiciously wide front hallway and windows on both sides of it. That hallway used to be an open breezeway. Someone boarded it up in 1935. Someone screened it in 1965. Someone hung wallpaper on it in 2001. But under the wallpaper, the roof is still one roof, and the 2 rooms are still the same 2 rooms Sam Johnson would recognize from his house near Stonewall in 1868. A restored dog trot in Nacogdoches County, a collapsed dog trot in Fayette County, a relocated dog trot at the National Ranching Heritage Center, a brand new architect-designed dog trot in Kendall County, air-conditioned and enclosed on a lot that cost more than every Texas dog trot ever built put together. You will see, in other words, a house that came into Texas with the first Anglo settlers, that lived through the Republic, the Confederacy, Reconstruction, Juneteenth, the age of cotton, the age of the sawmill, the age of the automobile, and the age of central air. A house that housed white yeoman farmers and German immigrants and enslaved men and women and their freed descendants. A house that stood on land the settlers took from the Caddo, the Karankawa, the Comanche, and the Mexican grant holders who had lived there before them. a house that most Texans have forgotten about and that a few Texans have started to remember. 2 doors on the same porch, 10 feet apart. Between them, an open passage, a roof above, a wooden floor below, open air on both sides, a room without walls, in the middle of a house that was doing everything at once, cooling a family, housing a family, containing a labor system, standing on a taken landscape and holding in its center an open space that the wind could still move through in the summer of 2026, 170 years after it was built. That is the dog trot. That is what it was doing in Texas. That is what is left of it today, and that is the story that no other American house can tell.